الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us tawfiq and success. He makes us of those who are guided and guide others. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He keeps us upon the Sirat al-Mustaqim and that He protects us from all forms of deviation in Aqeedah and otherwise. This is another session where we are looking at Al-Aqeedah at-Tadmuriyyah of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah with the taqreeb by Shaykh Muhammad ibn al-Uthaymeen. And now we have reached the chapter where the Shaykh is talking about the third group of people. Previously we have looked at the Aqeedah of al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have understood a number of principles that the Shaykh has said. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as He has described Himself and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This means that we can only speak of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the unseen in general with evidence. If we don't have any evidence, whether it's affirmation or negation, then we are not allowed to talk about these areas without evidence. This is known as something which is, with the ulama, as tawqifiyah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَدْرِبُوا لِلَّهِ الْأَمْثَالَ. Do not make examples of Allah, for example. أَن تَكُونُ اللَّهَ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Are you speaking of Allah which you have no knowledge? Therefore, the first principle is that we affirm what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has affirmed for Himself, and we do not make things up. Another principle that we have seen from the Aqeedah and the Manhaj of al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah is that whatever is affirmed of perfection. وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوا بِهَا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, all perfection belongs to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also from the principles that we have seen when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah is that we balance affirmation with negation. So whatever in the text has been affirmed, we affirm. Whatever has been negated, we negate. And whatever has been affirmed, then we negate the opposite. And whatever has been negated, then we affirm the opposite. These are from some of the principles that we have previously looked at from the Aqeedah of al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah. Also from the principles, a very important one, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names and attributes cannot be likened to the creation. He says subhanahu about Himself, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like unto Allah. So when we are affirming for Him, we are not resembling Him to the creation in the slightest. What we also understand from this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes are affirmed in a manner that befits His majesty. These are from the principles that the Shaykh has established for us. Then he talks about, now here, this is the chapter, فَصْلٌ فِي الزَّائِغِينَ أَنْ سَبِيلِ الرُّسُلِ وَإِتْبَاعِهِمْ فِي أَسْمَاءِ اللَّهِ وَصِفَاتِهِ. The types of zayg, meaning deviation, from the people who have deviated from the path of the Rusul, not just the Salaf, not just the Nabi, but all of the messengers. And the Shaykh has established for us that there are two main groups, the Mumathila and the Mu'attila. We looked at the Mumathila and our response to them. The Mumathila affirm, and they go into extremes in affirming, so they affirm and then they resemble Allah to the creation. And the Shaykh gave us evidences on how that is wrong from not only the Sam', which is the Kitab and the Sunnah, but also the Aql and the Hiss, meaning from our fitrah, from our senses. Then in the last lesson we began looking at the Mu'attila. And the Mu'attila are of different groups and different levels. The lowest level of them are those people who make ta'weel. And this is commonly found within the madhahib of the Kullabiyya and the Ash'ariyya and the Maturidiyya. So they make ta'til, but not complete ta'til. They affirm some of the names and attributes of Allah and they negate others, and then, there is not complete ta'til. And the Shaykh gave us evidences on how that is wrong, and from the Sam' and the Aql and the Hiss. Then we looked at the second group, which is the Mu'tazila. And the Mu'tazila, they did something which was different from the rest of the Mu'attila, which is they affirmed the name for Allah, but they negated attributes. So it's as if they gave names to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they were empty names. What they called them, Asma' al-Alam, meaning they said that these are names, these are names for Allah, but they don't carry any attributes. Today we're going to be looking at two more groups from what has been mentioned in this chapter, and then the Shaykh concludes this chapter with a very good conclusion with certain principles, etc. And then inshallah we can see what he has next in the chapter following. Anyway, so he says Faslun, chapter at-Ta'ifa al-Thalitha, the third group, غلاة الجهمية والقرامطة والباطنية. So these are new names, but these are names of sects which deviated from the methodology of the Salaf. The Jahmiyyah, the Qaramitah, and the Batiniyah. Now, the Jahmiyyah are those people who fell into philosophy. I think we talked about Jahmiyyah bin Safwan and his teacher Ja'd ibn Dirham before in last week's lesson, but the Qaramitah and the Batiniyah are the very first of the Rawafid. And what all three of these groups did is they said, okay, we will affirm only limited affirmation for Allah. So the Shaykh is saying here, وَطَرِيقَتُهُمْ أَنَّهُمْ يُنْكِرُونَ الْأَسْمَاءُ وَالصِّفَاتِ. Completely just reject everything. وَلَا يَصِفُونَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى إِلَّا بِالنَّفِيِ الْمُجَرَّدِ عَنِ الْإِثْبَاتِ. Everything was negated. Everything was negated. And even what they affirmed, even that was empty. So everything was negated. وَيَقُولُونَ, and these groups say, إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْمَوْجُودُ الْمُطْلَقُ بِشَرْطِ الْإِطْلَاقِ. هُوَ الْمَوْجُودُ الْمُطْلَقُ بِشَرْطِ الْإِطْلَاقِ. So they have said there's only one attribute, which is that Allah exists. Allah exists. Now, as we have seen before, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can we affirm for him a name and an attribute that he is al-Mawjood? We need evidence to say that this is a name of Allah, but this is what they have done. But this goes against our methodology, which is there isn't anything from the Kitab to say that one of the names of Allah is that he is al-Mawjood. But this is what they have done. They have said, no, he can't be al-Hayy. So we'll call him Mawjood. Why he can't be Hayy? The people in this sect here, or in this category here, what they are basically saying here is, if we affirm for Allah what he has affirmed for himself, number one, it necessitates that he has a body. So if you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, he has face, he has rahmah, he gets happy, he gets angry, he speaks, etc. They have said this is resembling Allah to the creation, and all of it is ilzamat really. They have said, okay, if you affirm this, then it must mean this, then it must mean this, then it must mean that, and the end conclusion is that it must mean that he has a body. I mean, he cannot have a body because then that would be him likened towards the creation. So one of the reasons why they say we have to negate everything is because we are trying to run away from affirming a body for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A second reason the Shaykh is mentioning here is that they negate for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala names and attributes because they say that this would then necessitate that Allah is hadith. Now hadith is something which comes about, something which is new. Me speaking now is something which is hadith. They have said the creation have this attribute of al-huduth, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be hadith, meaning nothing new can come from Allah, because then that would necessitate that this new thing must be created, or it necessitates inability that he wasn't able to do it before he did the action. So they are saying here, these names and attributes cannot be given to Allah because it would necessitate something new for Allah. And necessitating something new for Allah either means that that new thing is created for Allah, which cannot be possible, all ilm al-kalam, all of this is philosophy. And the second reason is because it would then necessitate that he wasn't able to do it before. So for example, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives you now, or answers your dua now, which is a time which is mubarak, after Salatul Asr on the day of Jum'ah, the Jahmiyyah say, no, the dua is not going to be accepted from Allah right now. So when you say, oh Allah forgive me, or Allah grant me this, or Allah protect me from that, al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah are saying, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks whenever he wants, however he wants. So when you make the dua will be answered either instantly, but it happens whenever he chooses, subhanahu. They say no, this would necessitate huduth for Allah, so it's not possible. So you say now, oh Allah forgive me, Allah is not going to forgive you right now. So what's their way around it? They say everything happened in eternity. So he knew on this day from eternity that you're going to make dua to him, and he knew from eternity that he's going to give you or not give you or whatever it might be the answer. So they have said there is no huduth for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a third reason, and I think this is one of the questions that we had from one of the brothers, is that we believe in monotheism. And the people of Shirk believe in pantheism. Pantheism basically means that everything is Allah. So Allah is everywhere. Allah is personified in that pillar, in the carpet, in you, in me, in the sun, in the moon. This is what the people of Shirk believe. Now, when Jahmiyyah bin Safwan went to debate some of the people in India, they gave him this doubt, which is they said to him, okay, you all say that we believe in Shirk, that Allah is in this and Allah is in that. You believe in Shirk also. You say Allah is Allah, then He's Ar-Rahman, and He's Ar-Rahim, He's Al-Malik, Al-Quddus. How can you have one entity that has all of these names and attributes? And some of these names and attributes appear to contradict one another. He gets angry, but then he's merciful. So Jahmiyyah bin Safwan was like, okay. So he came back with this, and the Shaykh is saying here, وَشُبْهَتُهُمْ أَنَّهُمْ اعْتَقَدُوا, and from their doubts is they believed أَنَّ إِثْبَاتِ الْأَسْمَاءِ وَالصِّفَاتِ, that when you affirm these names and attributes for Allah, all of these names and attributes, يستلزم التشبيه, we've just talked about tashbih, resembling Allah to the creation, body, something new, وَالتَّعَدُّدْ, that you are now saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one entity, but with these names and attributes, He becomes multiple entities. So then what they said is we negate. So the Shaykh is talking about here at-Ta'ifa al-Thalitha, Wulat al-Jahmiyyah wa Qaramitah al-Batiniyyah, meaning that they negate everything. وَلَا يَصِفُونَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى إِلَّا بِالنَّفِي الْمُجَرَّدِ عَنِ الْإِثْبَاتِ, everything except one thing, هُوَ al-Wujood al-Mutlaq, because they have said He has to exist, right? So He exists, so that makes Him mawjood. But if He is al-Hayy, then He can't be al-Hayy, because you are alive and I am alive. Then if we're going to say Allah is al-Hayy, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-Hayyul Qayyum, even though it's there in one of the greatest ayat or the greatest ayat in the book, they'll say no, He's not al-Hayy. Because it would necessitate a body, it would necessitate huduth, and it would necessitate at-Ta'addud. So they have said He is al-Mawjood. But the Shaykh is saying here, they say وَيَقُولُونَ إِنَّ اللَّهُ هُوَ الْمُجَرَّدْ الْمُطْلَقِ, sorry, هُوَ الْمَوْجُودُ الْمُطْلَقِ بِشَرْطِ al-Itlaq. What does that mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the absolute existence, al-Mawjood al-Mutlaq. And what they mean by that is that He has always existed and He will always continue to exist, al-Mutlaq. بِشَرْطِ al-Itlaq. And what that means is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists on the condition that there is nothing attributed to Him other than this. So according to the Jahmiyyah and the Qaramitah and the Batiniyyah, the Shia in Iran, etc., they believe that Allah exists, nothing else, that's it. He's not Rahman, He's not Rahim, He's not Khaliq, He's not, and nothing else, that's it. And anything that we have which affirm or necessitate affirmation, all of this happened in eternity. So a person will say, okay, if this is the only name and attribute you're giving to Allah is that He is al-Mawjood, then who created us? They will say, yes, He did create, yes, He did decree, yes, He did forgive, yes, He did answer, but all of that happened in eternity. What we are now affirming from that point on is that He is al-Mawjood, that's it. What's the response? The Shaykh says here, وَالرَّدُّ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنْ وُجُوهٍ. There are multiple ways that we can refute this. Number one, أن الله تعالى جمع فيما سمى ووصف به نفسه بين النفي والإثبات. And this has already come in the sense that the Shaykh is saying here, if you look at the Kitab and if you look at the Sunnah, Allah subhanahu, like the principles that we just mentioned before, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described Himself. The Messenger of Allah has described His Lord. As the Shaykh has also said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حَدِيثًا وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا, who is more truer in speech than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah has spoken and He has given Himself this description. The Messenger of Allah has spoken and He is al-Amin, Imam fi as-Sama'. Therefore, and He is trustworthy. Therefore, when they have spoken, then we accept what they have said. The Shaykh is also saying here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given Himself the description between affirmation and negation, then we accept. So the Shaykh is saying here, by them negating everything and only affirming this one thing, this is the resemblance of what the people from Banu Israel did from beforehand when it came to their Aqeedah in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْدِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْدِ. Do you believe in some of the book and you reject some others? What this basically means, the Shaykh is saying here, is that from Banu Israel, those people who deviated from the message of Musa alayhi salam, is that they said, we are going to take certain things and we are going to negate the rest. They did this in Aqeedah, but they did this in the Sharia, and the Sharia is well known to us all. And this is how they ended up making the tahrif of the kitab. Oh, this is too hard, or this doesn't make sense, or we don't like this one. So they rejected it. Hence the reason why he has given this ayah, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْدِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْدِ, is that you accept some of it, but then you reject the others. So the Shaykh is saying here, this is exactly the same attitude and methodology and the resemblance when it comes to the kuffar from Banu Israel. The second response that the Shaykh says is that what they are doing is they are making up principles which don't exist. أن الموجود المطلق بشرط الإطلاق, like they have said, okay, we affirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Wujood on the condition that there aren't any other attributes attributed to him. It necessitates لا وجود له في الخارج. Which basically the Shaykh is saying here is that if you are saying that Allah exists, and he will expand on this later on, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, but he has no attributes. In essence, what you are basically saying is that you have this entity which exists, but he doesn't do anything. If you've got this entity that exists and he doesn't do anything, then where does the effects of the existence of that entity come about when it comes to the creation? And I think we had this before in last week's lesson also, which is when they say that we affirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, but he doesn't have actions. It's the same thing that the Mu'tazila was saying from last week. Then what we will basically say to them, okay, you affirm names, but there are no attributes to that. So then what's the point in the name, number one? But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has got those names. So say, for example, he's al-Khaliq, but that's just the name that you're going to give him, but he has no action of creation. How does the creation come about? So the Shaykh is basically saying, same thing here, is that you have made up these principles which don't make any sense. وَهَذَا غَايَةُ التَّعْتِيلِ وَالْكُفْرِ. And the purpose is to make ta'til and kufr, which is that when you are saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists on the condition بِشَرْطِ الْإِطْلَاقِ وَإِنَّمَا هُوَ أَمْرٌ يَفْرُدُهُ الذِّهْنُ وَلَا وُجُودَ لَهُ فِي الْحَقِيقَةِ. In their minds they have made this principle, theorized it, but in reality there is no mawjood, because the effects of what is mawjood according to them has not come about. So then who has created the creation? They will say the thing that is mawjood, bishart al-Itlaq. But if you're saying bishart al-Itlaq, then he hasn't created it. The third thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and again there is repetition because the answer is going to be the same sometimes. قولهم, in their statement, إن الصفة عين الموصوف. Now this is also very important. You see, the Christians, they say God is love, right? This is similar to what the Jahmiyyah are saying here. And the Mu'tazila are very similar to them in this. They say that if you affirm Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being ar-Rahman, that he is merciful, that means attributing mercy to Allah means all mercy is Allah. All mercy is Allah. So now if you are merciful to your child, they will say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy is found in you because he is ar-Rahman. Inna sifa ayn al-mawsuf. Also connected to what they have said here is that when you have an attribute, then it becomes the essence itself. And remember, we gave an example of this table last week. We've got this stand here now. We've got the stand itself, which is the that, which is the essence. There are so many sifat that we can give it. It's brown, it's wooden, it's rectangle, it's whatever, right? What they are saying here is that when you say that it is brown, that means the stand is brown. They are saying that everything is brown must be the stand. This is what they say. This is what I was giving the example. Like if you are merciful to your son, they are saying that if you are saying that Allah is ar-Rahman, that means all forms of mercy is Allah. And like I was saying, this is what the Christians believe, because they say God is love and God is this and God is that. The Shaykh is saying here that this is wrong, and I think it makes sense to us that this is wrong, and this is exactly what the Shaykh is saying here. فإن المعلوم بالضرورة العقل والحس أن الصفة غير موصوف. What you are saying here, that everything is brown, has to be part of this here, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to the aql, it doesn't make sense to your senses, and it is completely erroneous. And again, the Shaykh is saying it's because of these false principles that you have made up. Therefore, what they are trying to say is that no, we can't affirm all these attributes for Allah, because if you affirm them, then that basically means that Allah is part of the creation, Allah has got a body, Allah has hadith, etc. What we are saying here is that that's wrong. What we are saying here, and this is the response from al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, is that Allah is the Dhat Subhanahu. And He has given Himself descriptions which are asma and sifat of the Dhat. So Allah is Allah, that is the entity, that is the Dhat Subhanahu. He is Ar-Rahman, Huwa Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik. He has given Himself these names and He has given Himself these attributes. Not that all Rahmah is Allah, and not that all Khalq is Allah, or all Mulk is Allah, etc. But this is what they're saying. In the Sifa Ayn al-Mawsuf. We're saying no. The Sifa yubayyin al-Dhat, or yasif al-Dhat. It explains and it clarifies and it describes the Dhat. The fourth response that the Shaykh is giving here to the Jahmiyyah is that أن وصف الله تعالى بصفات الإثبات. Now here what the Shaykh is basically saying here is, when you have affirmation with negation, this is more complete. دل الإكمال من وصفه بصفات النفي. To clarify this point, the Jahmiyyah and the Qaramitah and the Batiniyyah and the Shia and all these people, if you were to listen to them speaking about the names and attributes of Allah, they won't obviously approach this topic in the reality of the situation, which is that they are making kufr. What they will say is they will try and dress the situation up by saying, oh well, we deny that Allah is Ar-Rahman because we are trying to, purify Allah from resembling the creation. We're trying to perfect and show magnitude to Allah, that He is far greater than anything. So they will do these kind of things. The Shaykh is saying here, okay, what you are trying to do is negate everything for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the attempt of affirming perfection and completion for Allah. However, the methodology which is found in the Quran and the Sunnah with the understanding of the Salaf as-Salih is more complete, which is when you've got affirmation balanced with negation, that's when you get the completion. This is what the Shaykh is saying here. لأن الإثبات أمر وجود يقتضي تنوع الكمالات في حقه، وأما النفي فأمر عدمي لا يقتضي كمالا إلا إذا تضمن إثباتا. If a person was to, in English, if a person was just to affirm, then you are affirming and you are venerating this person, but you are not necessarily venerating this person and showing completion, because you haven't negated from him any kind of imperfection. As for negating, then what you are doing is, when you are constantly negating, فَأَمْرٌ أَدَمِيٌّ لَا يَقْتَدِي كَمَالًا. When you are negating, what you are basically doing is you're stripping away Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from these names and attributes. What are you left with? عَدَمِيٌّ لَا يَقْتَدِي كَمَالًا. Nothing. Except that the negation has to come with the ithbat. That's when you get the perfection. Hence, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْء, negation, there is nothing like unto Him. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, and He is as-Sami' al-Basir, affirmation. And even in Surah Al-Ikhlas, and even Ayat al-Kursi, you will find negation, affirmation, negation, affirmation. Al-Khamis, response to the Jahmiyyah. قولهم إن إثبات الصفات متغايرة. The affirming, so now this is again going back to the issue of ta'addud. They say, if we were to affirm the attributes for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then for us that would be as if you were contradicting one another. So this one is like this, and then you're saying Allah is like this, then you're saying Allah is like that, and then Allah becomes like this, and He becomes happy, then He becomes angry, and then He speaks, and then He doesn't speak, and then He's ascending, then He's descending. متغاير مغاير للموصوف يستلزم التعدد. They're saying in their philosophy that if you're saying that Allah is Ar-Rahman, and then He is Sari'ul Hisab, if you're saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is qabid, but then he is basit, if you are saying that he makes istiwa, but then he makes nuzul, they seem to contradict one another. Therefore, that can only then mean that there are multiple ilahs. Because these attributes then should be taken away from the that in order for that contradiction to be lifted. The Shaykh says in response, قَوْلٌ بَاطِلٌ مُخَالِفٌ الْمَعْقُولُ وَالْمَحْسُوسِ, and you can even add to that manhaj of the Salaf al-Salih. The Shaykh is saying here that this is a false statement. It goes against the aql and it goes against the mahsus, which is the senses. How so? The Shaykh says here, just because you've got one thing which has multiple sifat, it doesn't necessitate that you have multiple dhawat. Okay, so now this thing is brown and it is rectangular and is made out of wood. You give it several attributes, right? Does that now necessitate that we've got separate things, that we've got something which is brown and you've got something which is separate which is made out of wood, then you've got something else which is separate that has been varnished? It doesn't necessitate that. And again, the Shaykh is saying here, this goes against the aql and it goes against the hiss. And this is an example of the hiss. Not like we're resembling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the creation, a'udhu billah. Wallahi al-mathal a'la, of course. To Allah belongs the highest example. But the Shaykh is using, what we are doing is we're using this to show what the Shaykh is basically saying here, that it doesn't necessitate that. And this is the world that we live in, and we know that. فَهَا هُوَ الْإِنسَانُ الْوَاحِدُ. And he gives an example of a human being. You've got one human being, and you give him several attributes. He is hay, he is sami', he is basir, he is aqil, he is mutakallim, he is alive, he hears, he sees, he has intellect, he is able to speak, etc. That doesn't necessarily mean that you've got separate people for each one of those attributes. As-Sadis, the sixth response. قَوْلِهِمْ فِي الْأَسْمَاءِ. And when it comes to the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they say that if you were to have names for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَيَقْتَدِي أَن يَكُونْ إِثْبَاتَهَا تَشْبِيهًا. And again, there's a bit of a repetition. But the Shaykh is basically saying here that what they say is that when you've given Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala these names, then you are likening Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the creation. I think the answer is similar to what we have just said. But the manhaj here and the methodology of the Salaf is that we affirm in a manner that befits His Majesty without asking kayf, without asking how, without resembling Him to the creation. No takyif and no tamthil. And as-Sabi', which is similar to as-Sadis, and the seventh one is that they say that in al-ithbat yastalzim tashbihuhu bil-mawjudat. Now this is a little bit different to the previous one, which is, now we're going to see this again with the philosopher. Number 6, they say, if you say that you have a face and Allah has a face, that would then mean that you are resembling Allah to the creation and the creation to Allah. That's number 6. What we will say in response to that, no, Allah has a face, we don't know how. I have a face, you know how. Allah has hands, we don't know how. The creation has hands, we know how they are, right? So when it comes to the attributes of Allah, bila takyif. Number 7, they say, إن الإثبات يستلزم تشبيهه بالموجودات. If you affirm for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what He has affirmed for Himself, then you are resembling Him to the creation. So what they say here, this is a little bit different to the previous one. So what they say here is, what we will do is we will negate so that He doesn't become like the creation. So we constantly keep negating and negating and negating so that we end up with this purified essence which is not like the creation. The 6th point here is they're saying is, well, if you were to have it your way, then it would mean that you're resembling. But the 7th one here, the Shaykh is saying here, that the reason why they fell into so much nafi is because of, like we said before, is that they are trying to come with this conclusion of refining and purifying what we believe in when it comes to Allah. Even that's problematic in the sense that, as the Shaykh has mentioned in other works, which is that they are saying for themselves that they are in a position to affirm for Allah what He hasn't affirmed for Himself, or the other way around, because they say that the speech of Allah is not clear enough, so they have put it upon themselves that they need to refine. That's a problem in itself. But what they end up doing is, and then they start saying that, well, Allah isn't like this, and Allah isn't like that, and Allah isn't alive, and Allah isn't this, and Allah isn't that, in order for the purpose, the end result is that they want to completely negate so that they come to this final conclusion of perfection. What's the response to that? The response to that is that their logic actually leads يستلزم تشبيهه بالمعدومات. What they are trying to do is not resemble Allah to the creation, but in their end result, they have resembled Allah to something which doesn't exist. But had they taken the methodology which was the way of the Salaf as-Salih, they would negate this one and that one, which is that they would negate resembling Allah to that thing, those things which are present with the mawjudat, as well as negating any kind of resemblance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the ma'dumat, which is those things which don't exist. But what they have ended up doing is that they have ended up with a conclusion which is close to say that Allah doesn't exist. Na'udhu billah. And this is even worse than the thing that they were trying to free themselves from, which was the tashbih. Because had they affirmed what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had affirmed, and they've said that we affirm without any kayf, then this would have been what was upright. But they started off in a place, and then they moved on away from the methodology of the Salaf with what they would probably claim is a pure intention, which we obviously have doubts in. But then the end result is that they ended up in a worse position than they were in the first place. This is what the Shaykh is saying here. وَذَلِكَ أَقْبَهُ مِن تَشْبِيهُ بِالْمَوْجُودَاتِ, which is what they were saying in the first place. وَحِينَئِذٍ, and as a result, فَإِمَّا أَن يُقَرِّرُوا بِالْإِثْبَاتِ فَيُوَافِقُ الْجَمَاعَةِ, either then they have to say, okay, we need to make ithbat of certain things. If they were to say that, then now they are in line with the Jama'ah, meaning al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. وَإِمَّا يُنكِرُوا النَّفِي كَمَا أَنكَرُوا الْإِثْبَاتِ فَيُوَافِقُ غُلَاةٌ مِنْ كَرَامِةِ وَالْبَاطِنِيَّةِ وَغَيْرِهِمْ. If they end up continuing saying that, we don't believe that Allah has this one or that one, and they continue negating, then they end up resembling the Qaramitah and the Batiniyyah, meaning the Jahmiyyah, and resembling them, where they basically says nothing exists except for al-Wujood. What does that al-Wujood do? Well, we don't know. Nothing. That then is closer to tashbih bil ma'dumat, as the Shaykh is saying here. This is what the Shaykh had to say about the Jahmiyyah. I think maybe we'll talk about the fourth group next week, and perhaps the conclusion next week as well. The next group he's talking about is the falasifa, the people of philosophy and ilm al-kalam. And then he's got a chapter where he, like we said before, concludes everything from the previous chapters. And inshallah we'll probably look at that next week. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us tawfiq and the best of success in the dunya and the akhirah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps us guided upon the Shart al-Mustaqim. هذا والله أعلم صلى الله على محمد.